Johnny Boone, that's right, the Godfather of grass, and the Cornbread Mafia leader, has passed. Omerta. It's the Italian word for code of silence, and it's tattooed on the back of Kentucky's most notorious marijuana-growing ringleader. But while secrets around the Cornbread Mafia will forever be rooted in Marion County, there is now one undeniable fact about his most high-profile resident. The Godfather of grass is gone. A good old boy from Kentucky, he tried to make a living to put bread on the table and turned that living into the largest marijuana farming operation in U.S. history. John Robert Johnny Boone, known as the Godfather of grass for his role as the leader of the Cornbread Mafia, one of the nation's largest domestic producing marijuana syndicates, died on Friday in Marion County. He was 80. Joe Keith Beckett, one of the Central Kentuckians convicted in federal court in Louisville for his role in the infamous Cornbread Mafia, confirmed that Boone died on Friday night. Boone passed at the Village of Lebanon, a nursing home in Lebanon, at 11:11 p.m., you guys, all ones. He is survived by his wife, Marilyn Fenwick Boone, a daughter, Robbie Randall Cox of Springfield, three sons, John Robert Boone Jr. of Campsville, and Gene Boone and Jesse Boone, both of Springfield. His sister, Julie Giffey of Lexington, and 7 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. The visitation is Monday from 4 to 7 p.m. and Tuesday from 8 to 11 a.m. at the River of Life Community Church in Springfield, followed by the funeral at 11 a.m. on Tuesday. Johnny was kind of a visionary in the cannabis world. He held his guns on what he believed, and that's just the way he was, Beckett said. What we did back in the 80s and even earlier, which was frowned on somewhat, has now come full circle, and it's pretty well accepted in society today. The marijuana business once spread across 9 states, you guys. And although high-profile law enforcement raids involving Boone happened across decades, Kentucky Secretary of State records for the last 6 years show a business was incorporated called Beckett and Boone Cannabis, LLC. Although Boone's name is not on any of the official documents for the agricultural crop production business in Raywick, Kentucky, Beckett said he was involved in a new portion of the marijuana business. Boone is wearing a gray ball cap with Beckett and Boone stitched on in green in the photo, and Beckett posted him on his social media. The business produces organically grown CBD products per its website, and in a quote, the term Cornbread Mafia was coined over 40 years ago on September 15th, 1978 by one of our Kentucky growers when he reclaimed one of our marijuana fields that had been seized by local law enforcement. The Beckett and Boone CBD website states, in quotes, the name stuck and it's still with us today. Now, many of the founding members, their families, and friends are working in the hemp industry producing marijuana's legal cousin. The government once said the Cornbread Mafia, a group of mostly Kentuckians, pooled money, machinery, knowledge, and labor to produce $350 million in pot seized in 9 states. And that's only what was seized. Boone guarded his fields with Rottweilers whose vocal cords had been surgically removed so they could attack silently, the Courier-Journal reported back in 2017. And in quotes, to fend off rippers who might try to steal his crop, his crew set booby traps, including fish hooks hung at eye level, tripwires to dynamite, and live rattlesnakes tied to poles. Man, watch out, rippers.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is awesome. And Boone, despite a white, bushy beard that made him look like Santa Claus, did his business armed with semi-automatic Tech-9 handguns and AR-15 rifles. Pow, pow,
Santa Claus is black.
Yeah.
That's cap.
2A strong. That's funny, Rico. Boone spent the last 4 years of his life out of the headlines after a lifetime of creating them. COVID led to an early prison release for him, and while his criminal record stretches to the 1960s, he received an early release from federal prison in Ohio in May of 2020 after he's asked for the compassionate release following the death of 9 men from COVID-19, the highest of any federal prison at that point in the coronavirus pandemic. Nearly 150 inmates and staff were infected with COVID-19 at the Federal Correction Institution in Elkton, where Boone asked Western District of Kentucky Senior Judge Charles Simpson to release him after serving 42 months of a 57-month sentence for growing 1,000 or more marijuana plants. But that was just his last in a long line of convictions. In the 1980s, Boone was convicted for possession with intent to distribute pot, a 5-year sentence, and unlawful manufacture of 1,000 plants or more, receiving a 20-year sentence and paroled in 1999. That 20-year sentence was for running a marijuana operation from which, on a cold, snowy October night in 1987 in central Minnesota, federal agents seized 185 tons with a T of marijuana. In all, that 1987 raid uncovered the biggest marijuana farming operation in the United States. 27 farms, 25 of which were outside of Kentucky, across 8 Midwestern states: Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Wisconsin. 64 Kentucky residents were charged, including 49 Marion County residents, and the final process street value was $364 million. The entire illegal cooperative, officials found, could be tracked back to one tiny rural enclave in central Kentucky. That's right, moonshine mentality, you guys, because in a quote, "It all went back to a handful of good old boys in Marion County," a 1989 piece in the Courier-Journal magazine said. Then Assistant U.S. Attorney John Lee, who helped prosecute the case for the Minnesota raid, said the Kentuckians had a moonshine mentality. They came from an era where moonshine had been prevalent, and such live and let live attitudes had easily led moonshiners' children and grandchildren into marijuana with little guilt or stigma attached, the Courier-Journal reported. So how did it all work, you guys? That's right. Without pagers or cell phones, a farm would be rented or bought. The land would be plowed. A crop of corn would be sown, and then scattered among the corn, marijuana would be planted in fields as large as 20 acres. Sometimes the marijuana was planted directly among the corn, and sometimes it was grown in a small greenhouse and then planted in the rows. In a quote, "Once it was all planted, it would be watched inconspicuously, often by 2 men or by a man and a woman posing as husband and wife," the Courier-Journal reported. Another farm might be rented to process the marijuana, and Kentucky had its own history of raids on the Cornbread Mafia, like in 1983, when more than 20 Kentuckians were arrested for growing about 22,000 plants at farms in Hart County. In November 1986, Kentucky State Police raided a Woodford County farm that was processing marijuana. That raid netted 4,600 pounds of marijuana. A dozen people were arrested. That was the last large processing center of its kind in the state, and in 1986, Kentucky was the nation's leading grower of marijuana, but stiff penalties and enforcement within the Commonwealth led to smaller, more secluded operations. With the raids, seizures, and arrests continuing, one thing came clear to officials: the uniform uncooperativeness. That's right. In a quote, "In fact, the unwillingness of Kentuckians to talk would become almost legend," the Courier-Journal wrote back in 1989. But authorities identified Boone as the ringleader. In a courtroom speech in Minnesota during his April 1988 conviction, his speech enhanced the moonshiner image back in Kentucky. In a quote, with the poverty at home, marijuana is sometimes one of the things that puts bread on our tables," Boone said. In another quote, "We were working with our hands on earth God gave us. I don't understand why the law would take us for so long." His then girlfriend, Mary Jo McDonald, who was the camp cook, said before her sentencing, "We're just good old country folk, and we're not trying to do nobody no harm." She was sentenced to 5 years. Johnny Boone was beloved by the community, and Boone later spent 8 years on the run before he was found in 2016 outside Montreal, Canada, living under an assumed name. He was beloved and respected those in the community, buying air conditioners for schools, former Former U.S. Marshal Rick Cuban told the Courier-Journal in 2017 that the community repaid Boone with their loyalty. The Courier-Journal also wrote the following in a quote: when deputy marshals tried in vain to find him during the 8 years he spent on the EM, they ran smack into a wall of silence in his former houts like Springfield and Loretto. They were very honest, McCorbin said. They said they would tell where he was, even if they knew they would not snitch on him, is what they're saying. In another quote, according to James Higedon, a Lebanon native and author of The Cornbread Mafia, a homegrown syndicate's code of silence and the biggest marijuana bust in American history, Boone was born in Washington County and raised by his grandfather, a veteran of Prohibition who learned to supplement his family income with moonshining and bootlegging and whatever else seemed necessary to keep the farm afloat. Higedorn's account was published in 2012 when Boone was on the run, and as a 15-year-old in 1958, Boone won the state 4-H championship in sheep breeding, earning a trip to the Chicago for the National 4-H Congress, and 2 years later, he won another championship for tobacco growing. Graduating high school in 1961 as a 3-time football letterman and in the top 1/6 of his class, he planned to enter the University of Kentucky, wrote the Springfield Sun, according to Higedorn's book. And in a quote, instead, Boone started a family and stayed on the farm. And by the 1970s, he had channeled his 4-H skills into a new agricultural challenge: raising the best breed of pot ever grown in Kentucky, a variety that High Times magazine later named Kentucky Bluegrass, the book says. And in another quote, for a time he grew pot in Belize, which led to his first bust and a 5-year hitch in federal prison. In 1987, after police flew over a 355-acre farm in Minnesota and saw 2 huge rectangles of green below each the length of football fields, they raided that place. Boone led 3 squad cars and 5 officers on a chase, knowing he couldn't get away, but selfishly allowing his workers to escape, Higedon wrote in his book. And in another quote, when he was caught and asked his name, he responded, Charles Grass, you guys. Well, rest in peace to this drug war veteran is all I have to say on this. This was a fantastic story to read and account, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this.
I got to come with the correction department. It's Higdon.
Obama gave him clemency. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jim Higdon, and he's actually a really good guy. I actually was brought in to try and consult for him in 2022. He has a CBD brand called Cornbread CBD.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we referenced that in the article.
World.
Look at that.
He's got a book. You didn't reference the CBD company.
I did reference the CBD company.
Hey, do they as a non-California native, do y'all big on cornbread out here too?
Yes.
Everybody loves cornbread.
Yeah, we from the South.
Oh boy.
You don't like
Cornbread.
friends.
Like, is it big out here too?
Not as big, but it's for those that know.
Okay.
If you're into your barbecue and you don't like cornbread, you're missing out.
Yeah, every time we had barbecue in elementary school, there was always cornbread.
Do y'all put sugar in y'all's cornbread? Because if not, you're doing it wrong.
Well, butter and honey.
Yeah.
Come on.
All right,
No,
all right,
in it.
Jenny.
When you're making, I guess you don't know how to make it.
You know, you're from South Carolina.
Don't you start with me, okay?
You
The
put
Mission
butter and
District
honey
is
on it, but you got to put the sugar in it.
The world.
Oh boy.
Put sugar in your grits?
I mean, Todd, what do you have to say about this? I mean, you were alive during a lot of this time.
I was. I think it's very sad every time a pioneer, cannabis, a pioneer dies. I'm sure he's got more and more stories than you read about they did what they did. It's sad. He helped create what it is that we're doing today, right?
Exactly.
Just by simply doing it. There's another example. We were talking about it before, how the trap, happens before all of this happens. And, here's a pioneer who's on all of that shit, was willing to put his life on the line and put his money where his mouth is,
And he had no snitches in the crew.
That's
The other
right.
thing
How about that?
we forget
Bygone era.
to talk about the economic opportunity that legacy cannabis created for agrarian communities and the benefit that that often did, building schools, building bridges, helping people who are less advantaged. And making money and pursuing money is not a nefarious thing. And so, you know, there's this stupid debate in cannabis about, like, are you about the medicine, are you about the plant, are you about the money? And that's a false paradigm, because you could actually be about both and it doesn't contradict. And so somebody doing big things in big fields and making sure that they were community reinvesting because that was their model, that was their motto, that was their mantra, like, that is all really something that people should be taking notes on that playbook and trying to continue to replicate that approach to doing well and doing good. And so to do that for some of these rural communities, like, it's a beautiful story. And we honor people by remembering them. We honor people by you telling their story. And so I think it's lovely. And I think that culture, that moonshining culture, I mean, when they had a TV show about moonshiners on TV, I devoured every single one of them because I just loved the renegade culture and also the commitment to quality, the different types of moonshine, the different flavors. And so it's not a surprise, it shouldn't be to anybody in other regions of this country, that moonshining mentality, that renegade culture would automatically spill over into the cannabis activity that's been happening in that region for decades.
Of course.
I want to know.
All right.
Black market vices in business.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah, what were you going to say, Jenny Beth?
I want to know who had to tie the snakes to the stick.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Man, those booby traps, bro. I mean, I was just imagining.
Serious security.
I was just imagining walking and like catching a fish hook in your eyelid, bro, and how crazy that would be.
Yeah, that would suck.
It's not good. It's not good.
fun.
Would you rather catch
I know, and you have long lashes.
Oh, not my lashes.
Just saying.
No, those lashes would protect her against the barb. She would like bat, 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 and then just.
No, I don't think so. Because the fishing line, bro, is just like dental floss. It's just gonna slide right through.